Between the slaves. Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel, The Fifth Perspective. This is part 2 for my past life that I remember. If you did not see part 1, I would go back and watch that so you could hear everything leading up to this point, because there are things I mentioned that I'm going to bring up again to kind of come full circle. So in order for it to make sense, please go back and watch part 1 first. Okay, so to continue, Randy is like crying really hard and yells at me that he knows what I'm about to say. He knows the whole thing, the whole dream, everything, because that was him and he was there. So remember, I literally didn't even get to explain this dream. The furthest I got was just saying I had a dream in high school around 16 years old on the first and last time I met the love of my life in a past life, I think. And I remember I was in a bank. That's it. Okay. So after he says that to me, and I'm like in shock, shaking, and I feel like I'm going to fall out of my body. And I'm like, I feel like the energy is so insane of like, oh, I don't know. It almost felt like it was pulling apart and coming together. I just felt like something was just going to rip in front of me in space and time, and I could just fall right out. And so I'm emotional, and then I'm like crying, and I'm like, no, I'm like, shut the F up. I'm going to try not to swear in this. I was like, shut the F up. Like, no. I'm like, F you. Like, no. Like, okay. I'm like, then tell me about the bank then, tell me about the bank. And I'm like mad, I'm like pissed. Like, there's no way. Like, why won't I don't know. He's like bawling his face off. He's not trying to be mean or whatever. But in my head, I'm like, you are like playing with me right now. And he starts describing the bank. He's like, it was like all this like cream, like marble stone. It was like weirdly all cream in there. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, what about like where the money was? And he was like, it was like behind this, like those old school, like huge circle vaults. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, yes, it was. And then he was like, and I was coming in. He's like, I was coming in with 4 other guys from my gang, and I was like the head of them coming in to rob this bank. And I was like, yeah, no, there were 4 other guys besides you. And he's like, yeah. And then everybody went face down, and I saw you before that even happened. And I walked up to you and I put my hand out wanting to get you to stand up off the floor, like to be like this, like during this robbery. Okay. And I'm like, yes, you did. Like, this is so crazy. And I'm like, okay, no. I'm like, again, like, F you, like, shut the F up. Like, I'm like, what about the last time we met? Where were we? He's like, we were like on this like balcony of this place. I'm like, oh my God, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, what shape was the balcony? He's like, a half circle. And I'm like, okay, you were facing that balcony, but I saw from the corner of my eye the shape of the railing. What was the shape of the railing of that balcony? And he looks at me, he's like, duh, he's like, he goes like this. They were like wide, and I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, they were. And then he's like, what was with those like crazy tall French double doors? And I'm like, I know, right? Like, they were like weirdly like so tall. I'm like, and it was like really humid that night. He's like, yeah, we just start having a conversation about it. And I'm like, but like, that wasn't my place. I know that wasn't my place. And he goes, no. He's like, it wasn't my place either. He's like, my guys were. And he got some water. It's like my guys were downstairs, like robbing the place, and we had this like brief moment together upstairs. It was the last time like we would be with each other and see each other. And and I was like, okay, and I still was just like kind of like not even, I still was not fully believing him. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, how are we sitting on the balcony then? And he like grabs my hand and pulls me to him and makes me sit like across him, like legs straddling him, facing him. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, how are my hands? How are my arms? And he picks up my arms and he just goes like this and this around, the back of his head, like this and this. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, that was exactly right. And I was like, was I okay? I'm like, this I have to know. I feel like I was wearing like a cream silk like slip, and it was like to my knee. And he goes, yes, you were. And I go, Randy, did I? Because when I was a kid, I did not believe, like I didn't feel right in my body now. Like I was convinced I looked a certain way, and I changed my face very close to this person I was before, but it's not quite there. And I know I was like a white person before, similar hair where it's like dark brown and like wavy. I dye my hair black now. And he confirms to me, he's like, yes, she looks similar to how you do now, you know. And I was like, and I tell him what he looked like. And I'm like, I know you were tall, like somewhere around like 6'1" to 6'3", like you were tall. And he's like, oh, well, that explains why like my whole life I felt like wrong in my body, like part of my body was missing, you know? And after that, I'm trying to remember if there was anything else. Oh, and I asked him, I go, you said something to me before we kissed each other and I woke up, but I don't know what it was. And he goes, I know what it was. He's like, I asked you if I could kiss you one last time. And I got emotional and choked up. And he said that he had other dreams like after, when we weren't in each other's lives anymore. He didn't know where I was really anymore. He was like fleeing from cops. So like after this dream, I go back to the small town that his parents live in, and where my mom lives, near Cleveland. And I forget why, but like there was a point in time where, maybe because I wanted space for my mom or something, but because she was going through the divorce, the parents were cool with me like crashing there. So I was staying there for a while, like maybe like a week. And during the time that I was staying there with him, with me and him sleeping next to each other, we kept having more and more and more dreams of this life and just kept piecing it together. So he has a dream. He's like, oh my God. He's like, after you and we like lost contact. He's like, it just got worse and worse with the crimes. He's like, and it got out of control. He's like, I spiraled so bad and just got worse and worse without you. Like he wanted to find me again and he couldn't because he was on the run, and really spiraled bad. And then I had a dream. I married into wealth. I remember I like had the dress and the fur like thing around my arms, and there were like all these doors lining this building we were going in for some event. And I knew in my head, even though this wasn't a perfect time and a lot of craziness was happening, it was also an exciting time. And I saw my husband to my right. It's like a tall man with blonde hair, and I cared about him and I loved him, but I wasn't in love with him. Yeah, no, I wasn't in love with him, and I didn't like he wasn't the love of my life. I knew very well the love of my life was Randy, who was that gangster at that time. And we walked through the doors, and I look up and I see the chandeliers everywhere. And I thought to myself, wow, like it's so sad. I wish he could be here right now. Like it's so sad that he's not here anymore. Like I knew he wasn't alive anymore. And I told him this. I woke up and like, oh my God, Randy, like you died. Like I know you died. And I married someone else. I like married into wealth with this other person. I don't know if I ever had kids, but it showed me that moment. And then he had another dream. And he was like, oh my God, I died around, he guessed like around 30, somewhere around there, give or take. And he's like, I was running from the law. He's like, I think it was a setup. I think like people just wanted me out because they found me. And like he was running from them, and he remembered it just finally catching up to him and couldn't get away. And he was shot down by 2 cops. He remembers this. And died. And he's like, Alicia, he's like, this is why I was convinced I was going to die around 29, 30, right? Like when he didn't celebrate his birthday. And I was like, damn, I'm like, and that's why all this is like why I would say over and over as a kid, I miss the 20s, the 1920s, and was obsessed with the fashion and feeling like sentimental and sad when I heard jazz music, right? Everything like started making sense that we even thought as kids. So, and to correct it, he did not celebrate his birthday on his 29th birthday because he thought he was going to die that year. That's what he thought. Okay, so I take it upon myself. I'm like, well, I have a lot of information about you. Like, I still don't know who I was, but I just felt like I absolutely had to figure out who he was to have some sense of like peace in this. And I think that sense of peace was for both of us, honestly. So I started digging through FBI files, and I told myself I'm not going to read anything about anybody. I know exactly what his face looks like. I'm just going to keep scrolling through till I find him, till I see him. Like he has to be in there somewhere. So I'm scrolling and scrolling. And then all of a sudden, his face pops up, and my jaw drops. I gasped like in shock. And I literally am shaking like this. And I just start crying almost hysterically. Like I'm just crying really hard. I'm like, I can't believe this. So I start reading about him. And he was a gangster that did spend a lot of his time in Chicago prisons. And he somehow ended up meeting John Dillinger, who he, in this life, was obsessed with. And go figure how funny, in this life, he was like obsessed with gangsters from that time and the cars from that time. Well, it's because he was that. in this past life. There was a time when John Dillinger was in prison and Randy took lead while he was in prison. He was 6'3". He had blue eyes, fair skin. I also read how him and John Dillinger, at some point, because the law was on their tail so bad, that they tried to get surgery by a doctor to alter the way their face looked. And it did not work. Instead, it just left a lot of scarring. And both of them were so angry at this that they wanted to kill the doctor. But that would explain the scarring I saw on his face in the dream. That was from them trying to change their face with surgery. And how he died was the same. Running from the police. I do believe it was 2 cops that ended up catching up to him and shooting him down. And he died, this is the wild part, he died at 28. Which makes sense to me because I don't know when he died being 28, but he lived a life at 28 and died at 28. I'm almost wondering, I'll have to double check with Randy his birthday, because I'm almost wondering if his birthday was before he died in the past life, which is why he celebrated it. And that's why he didn't celebrate the 29th birthday, thinking that he was going to die, because in the past life, he already died, right? So there's that. I sent Randy the information, and at that point, I know me and him, oh my God, I saw the photos they used to put up, or just remember how they used to put up the black and white photos of people who died. I found that photo too, and I was just, the sounds that came out of me when I saw him dead in those photos, it was such immense grief I felt. And so that past life, I had this pattern, right, of falling for probably the one that's not the best for you, that, makes the bad decisions, and in this life, it's just weird. I had no idea why I wanted to move to Chicago. I just needed to. Well, in the past life, that's where Randy in that life spent most of his time, in the prisons in Chicago. Then, this is the crazy part. I'm almost wondering if when we're reborn, we start off on a similar path, because I remember watching this documentary on monks and the teachers, and when they teach their student, they find the student, and the student is with them for the rest of their life, right? They're teaching them, and then when they die, part of the responsibility of that student, that was to find him again, to find the reincarnation of his master, right? And they had this whole thing. I wish I remembered the name of the documentary, but I'm sure if you guys look it up, you can find it. And it blew me away, because they have so many tests that this baby has to pass. And it would be where there'd be lined up things from the past life there, just one thing out of all this stuff. And they go up and down, and the baby would choose that. like time and time again, this baby just kept passing their tests. And what they learned in their beliefs on reincarnation is that you're born X amount of a diameter from where your life was before, right? And so I almost find it funny then that my past life was somewhere not so far from Chicago, whether it was like, I don't know, I don't know, somewhere around there. I don't know if it was like Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois. I don't know. But, you know, it's like weird that I repeated this pathway and feeling drawn to have to go to Chicago. And then in this life, I have the same pattern of like unhealthy, like men that like just have their problems. And my whole life, I would say over and over to like everyone. And my mom, I'd be like, I don't know why, but the guy that I meet, like, I just really need him to have like medium-ish to dark hair, blue or green eyes, and like and tall, like 6 foot, 6'3", 6'4". I don't care. Like that was like my thing that I'm attracted to in this life. And I'm always like, I don't care if it's blue or green eyes, but like it just it has to be one or the other. That's like the ultimate thing I'm drawn to, which is the exact same thing I was attracted to in this past life. And here's the wildest thing that I like blew my mind, okay? The person, the longtime ex of mine in this life, Ryan, that I met in Chicago, who was not right for me, and it was like toxic in ways in that way, okay? Who was the love of my life. Like I haven't met someone since who probably surpasses what I felt then. I'm sure he already has, but it's hard for me to fall in love. It just is. Because I'm a very deep thinker and feeler, and it is hard, no offense, it is hard to find a man that can dive and meet me at that level, and be like more open and dive deep with me. But anyway, Randy in the 1920s, the man I found him to be is Homer Van Meter. Homer Van Meter. And the man in this life, my ex, who were still like family, of all names, Ryan Van Ertz. Is that not, am I like the only one that thinks that's so bizarre out of all the names you could have? It's like the odds of a lottery or something. So I found that very weird. Yeah, and Ryan is 6'1", medium color hair, green eyes. How funny. Anyway, it became apparent to me with the dream I had in Chicago about me needing to move to New York. Like that had to happen. And I am convinced that before this life, Randy and I promised each other that we would find each other again in this life. The wild thing is, like, you think if you find each other again, that you'd be together and spend this life together. That's not the case. Because although we found each other again, we are very different people in this life, very different personalities. You know, like everything that's happened to us in our lives, like completely different. And so although he means a lot to me and I always have love for him, and I know who he was before, he's a very special person to me, I know in this life, it's not him. It maybe in another one we will, maybe. But I think it was a really interesting thing and cool thing that we did find each other in this life and that we did have all this information that we just kept piecing together and that I was able to confirm and find him. Anyway, that is the story that changed my whole outlook on reincarnation and past lives. I mean, I realize now we've had many lives. We're not just this life. And we'll have many more. So I did say I would share his photo. It feels a little bit vulnerable to do so, but you guys know his name and he's all over the internet. Yeah, there's many articles and photos and wanted things with him. This is a lighter print of his face. They were wrong on the height on this one. There's the next one I'll show you is a wanted poster and they have 6'3" written. I definitely know that he was taller. I guessed it was somewhere around 6'1", 2 or 3. So yeah, the height on this one is not right. And I just thought like how crazy that the way I met him was at a bank robbery, and his criminal history, like he's literally wanted for bank robberies. I mean, there's other things he did, like stealing vehicles, and I'm pretty sure, he robbed a train. So, but he became like really known for these bank robberies, and he did, I think all of this probably started at the fact that he left home at the age of 16. Like he ran away from home and working as a waiter in a bellhop, and you're trying to get by. It to me, it makes sense that without that guidance and everything, he fell into this more. And he did do time in the Chicago prisons. He also did time in the Indiana prisons. I know he was like sentenced at one point for 21 years at the Indiana Reformatory, and that is where he met John Dillinger before being transferred to the Indiana State Prison. And then his release, like once he was released on parole, somehow he met Babyface Nelson. So he was like swimming with all of the top names of the gangsters we know. I think I even remember reading something about, I'll have to double check, like with Al Capone, but I know for sure it's Babyface Nelson, and that he was part of basically John Dillinger's gang. So yeah, that's this one. Not gonna lie, it's kind of sentimental seeing my face right next to his. But okay, so yeah, on this poster it says 6'3", and yeah, so that's accurate. Clearly he was very wanted, dead or alive, and unfortunately everything just caught up to him. And yeah, like me saying before that I didn't know if I was really resided, whether it was Chicago, Wisconsin, Indiana, I have no idea. But again, like a lot of these events take part in these areas, and I thought it was wild to find his burial site, and to see that he was buried at the Lindenwood Cemetery in, it says Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana. Like I have the exact sections and the rows, and I just feel like maybe I should visit it one day. So yeah, that is the whole story. I haven't really had any more dreams since we put it all together, and neither has Randy. And I think they served the purpose, um, for us to figure this out, the promise we kept to each other, um, and remembering who we were. Um, and yeah, if for some reason we get more information, I'll share it with you guys. I hope you guys like this video. Please do me a favor and like and subscribe, and turn on the notifications. I know you may not seem like it, but it does take a lot of time to record these videos and put them together for you guys. And I have so many stories that have just built up over my whole life that I've really wanted to share, to get a platform to that hopefully would have people that experience similar things brought to it, as well as people who don't and just want to have their perceptions opened up and widened. Yeah, so I just really am asking for you guys to please help me out here and like, follow, and turn on the notification bell. Okay, and I will see you guys next time.